Welcome to the Women Inspire Aspire podcast. In this episode, I talk to author Lakshmi about her life experiences. Hi, Lakshmi. Thank you so much for making time for appearing in my podcast. For the sake of audience, can you share a bit of background about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Venkat, for having me. Hi, everybody. My name is Lakshmi. I'm a writer. I have two books published. I live outside of Philadelphia with my husband and three children. In my day job, I'm a business analyst. That pretty much wraps up what I would call my intro.
Wow, that's quite brief. But I know that there is a lot of background behind that. So let's dwell deep into that. Um, I thoroughly enjoyed reading your book. So, can you tell us a bit about your journey as an author?
Oh, absolutely. I've been a voracious reader through my childhood.
Mhm.
And I think the advent of emails in the late 90s was like the first outlet where I started sending like daily updates to friends and family. And often I would get comments back saying they enjoyed, the detail with which I captured everyday events. I guess that was the first time validation played a huge role in kind of encouraging me to write more. And
Of
then I
course.
discovered, yeah. So then I moved to the US in 2001 and I discovered Suleka. I don't know if, I'm dating myself here, but um, that was one of the first open forums where you could post stuff and people would comment. So it was like the precursor to today's blogs. So you didn't own the content, but so one of the first pieces I wrote was about Pon Parkal,
Hmm.
and it for today's standards, I think it kind of went viral because I kept hearing from a lot of readers way after I posted it about how it resonated for them, and some of them said, this is not something they could even imagine, and some people said I was, just making up stuff because who in these days subjects themselves to this kind of stuff. So it was like very lively, engaging, going back and forth, and you know trying to manage trolls and stuff like that. So that was like one of the first things that then cemented the idea in my head that words have reach, words have impact. Then with the advent of blogging, sometime in 2004, 2005, I first had a blogger website, then I had one in WordPress. So over the years, since I've been writing consistently since about 2004, 2005,
Wow.
and some in 2012, um, I wrote my first fan fiction. So that was my first true foray into imagining a universe, creating. I wasn't creating the characters obviously because it's fan fiction, but it was a test for me to see if I could actually put together all the elements, the structural elements of a story, string it together and bring it to a conclusion. Again, I have no formal background in creative writing, or up until that point, I hadn't taken any courses. So I was just kind of freewheeling. And that story on Wattpad again reached a lot of readers, and that gave me the impetus to write Hindsight. And I think it was around 2012, right? So that's when the Nirbhaya rape happened in Delhi, and it affected me a lot.
Hmm.
Up until that point, I would just write on my blog and forget about things, but this one kept haunting me. And that was the core, like, as a woman, especially a woman in the 90s, 80s, and 90s India,
Mhm.
we've all, at least I can only speak for women, we've all been subject to what we call eve teasing. It's such a silly name for something that I think is pretty grave. And that constant state of hypervigilance, like you can't get on a bus, you can't travel in an overnight bus, you can't take a train overnight without, fortifying yourself, without being a light sleeper. Even if it's like 100 degrees outside, you're still covering yourself head to toe. It's all those little things that kind of become second nature. And then once I moved to the US and lived in a suburb where literally you don't see people for miles.
Hmm.
So I still remember in 2001, 2002, while I was still new to the US, I would remember to check every door, lock every latch. I wouldn't be
Hmm.
able to fall asleep quickly. because everything was glass windows, and you had like bay windows that literally went from ceiling to floor.
Right.
So it just felt so unsafe and insecure. Um, it's taken years and years of reconditioning, unlearning, and learning to kind of embrace a life without fear. So hindsight is practically a journey that most women in their mid-40s can relate to. It's about fear. It's about, more than anything, it's about trauma that we don't even realize that is embedded in our psyche. So the book was an attempt to kind of encapsulate that journey. And of course, in the process, because it's a story, it also kind of touches on relationships, marriage, and how all of these stored trauma impacts relationships, and how finding closure is not necessarily an end point.
Right.
It can just be the beginning of the next journey. So
Right.
that pretty much was the journey up until then. So I wrote the book in 2015. I finished writing it, and then I sat on it for like a few years. I would send it out to friends. They would read, give me feedback. So it was an iterative process, and I think finally I was ready to let go of it earlier this year, because I felt like if I held on to it, it was not freeing up my head to write the other stories I wanted to write, because I kept coming back to this, and I just couldn't commit myself to birthing another story. So that's the whole journey to the book.
Wow, that's a lot of time from 2015 to 2023 when you released the book.
24, no,
20.
24, February of this year, yeah.
Wow, that's a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
Me, myself, an author too. I really enjoyed the way you are writing, the intricate relating to the characters, their emotions and feelings. Is there any inspiration that you take from anybody, any other author, or any other examples, or is it just your own?
Oh no, there's a lot of inspiration, obviously, right? So when I write for children, Enid Blyton was, I wouldn't call an inspiration, but I was heavily influenced by how she could put herself in the mind of, a 7-year-old or 11-year-old or a 15-year-old. It was like trying to consciously emulate that kind of first-person POV
Mm,
comes from there. With hindsight, I think one of the earliest influences is Arundhati Roy, God of Small Things. I still remember her visceral description, the descriptions of like the air, the people. Sometimes it would make me uncomfortable, but it stayed with me.
right.
And so I wouldn't say that I emulate the way she writes. Obviously, if I did, I would be somewhere. But um, there is something about the way she describes textures and people and touches on the uncomfortable is something that I would like for my writing to absorb.
Mm,
That's one of the earliest influences. Then obviously along the way there have been other influences, but nothing notable, like meaning something that I can say, yes, this is a person I would like to write like.
okay, got it. Um, Moving forward, I think there's a lot to unpack in terms of your background from India and United States and whatever life experiences that you have gone through. I would like to leave the floor open to you and talk about any topic of your choice. Pick any topic of your choice and talk a bit about it, because we want the audience to listen to what you have to say. This is what the podcast is all about. So,
Oh,
uh,
absolutely.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there's a lot of topics I can talk about, and things that really get me animated. Let me share a few, and maybe you can help me decide, what would be a better fit for your audience. Obviously, as a mid-40s woman, talking about uncomfortable things like menopause, about my journey or my evolution as a person, the person I was in my 20s versus the one I was in my 30s and in my 40s. It's been like, each decade is a different version. When I look back on myself at this point, I can't even recognize the person I was back then. So there's a lot to that. There's a lot to unpack there. Then, of course, like the adoption, which I don't like to talk about much online, but the parenting aspect of it, right? So I became a mother after, my journey to motherhood has been a roller coaster. And then once, most people think like, that's the destination, but what we don't realize is that's just the beginning of the rest of your life. And that journey in itself uh, it's taught me a lot of things.
Mm.
Um, in terms of being an older mother, not having a peer group to relate to. So, I mean, we pick any of these, and that in itself would be an open discussion.
Mm.
Um, then, of course, we talked about writing.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
so
and
let's
yeah,
talk
let's
about
pick something. Hmm.
menopause a bit.
Hmm.
So, what are your views and what are your experiences on that?
Yeah, so when I say menopause, it's like the whole spectrum. Men are through puberty, through the whole process of pregnancy and menopause. With one thing, as an Indian woman, again, I can only speak from my singular point of view as a
Right.
mid-40s Indian woman, right?
Right.
So being a Gen X person, born and raised in a fairly conservative family, and then I worked at Wipro for about 5 years in Bangalore, and that was the first time I had ever uh, been, single and responsible for myself. But through this entire journey into up to the point of marriage, not one person, not one woman, or not one family member actually talked about what comes after. There's this hush hush conversation about sex. There is this hush hush conversation about, having a baby. Nobody talks about the immediate aftermath of pregnancy, or what the journey to pregnancy, if it's not, once and done.
Mm.
Nobody talks about infertility. It's all referred to obliquely. We don't
Mm.
talk about the pain, physical or mental. We don't talk about depression, whether it's, depression that stems from not being part of a clique that motherhood really is, the depression that comes from the immediate aftermath of delivering a baby, the hormonal highs and then the instant lows, and how that can last for months and months.
Yeah.
Nobody talks about the body changes that accompany menopause,
Right.
not just the body changes, but also how you're extremely irritable. Like in any given month, you probably, as a woman, have 3 good days. Your post-menopausal hormones is a different beast altogether. It's
Mm.
like you're either highly irritable, you're annoyed, you're hot, your body is just ballooning, or if,
Mm.
in some rare cases, you're probably losing a lot of weight. But none of this makes sense because there is no one set of things. And every woman has her private version of hell.
Right.
And surprisingly, there's not much conversation surrounding it. Even today, I can't have like an open conversation with my mom or with my sister about any of these things. I mean, at least with my sister, we'll talk, but it will still be couched. There'll be euphemisms. There is no, how do I put it? Blunt talk. I
Mm.
can be open and blunt with strangers on the internet, but I can't do it with my family. So
Yes.
as a mother, this has influenced my parenting journey. So now I'm that extra mom. I'm the mother that my children probably cringe, because I'm open, I'm blunt, and I talk to them about things that make them uncomfortable. Because I'm kind of overcompensating for the kind of motherhood and the kind of sisterhood I wish I had at that age.
Interesting. Interesting. That's pretty nice. Actually, I have seen people talk to specialists like doctors about the
Mm-hmm.
menopause that they are going through, and it the specialists are really able to relate to what they are going through, the hotness, the flashes, the mood changes and things like that. And there are some recommendations that they give in terms of medication, in terms of how to manage themselves and how to manage their environment and things like that. Do you think that helps?
Probably, but again, as a personal journey, as someone who's walked the lines of infertility and having experienced what hormones can do to you. So this was way before menopause, right? So this was the infertility journey is a private hell in itself. So hormones take a toll on you, and no two people react to hormones the same way. So whether it is gaining weight, whether it is being clinically depressed, each person goes through their hell, and nobody really talks about it. And God forbid you have a male doctor, it's even harder because you can talk about pain. You can say, hey, this hurts. And I'm not sure if you're aware of it. For most urological complications or anything that involves private parts, men are likely to be more sedated, given options for sedation, whereas a pap smear or in any kind of uterine examination, it's not an option. You have to ask for it, and even then you have to justify your case for it.
Is it
That's
in
just
US
insane.
or in India?
Yeah. I can only speak for the US because this is where I've experienced it. But I doubt it's going to be any different for the average woman anywhere in the world. I'm sure there are exceptions to every rule. I'm sure there will be, like, for every person saying, hey, this isn't working for me, there will be two people who said, there's nothing wrong with the system, it works perfectly. So
Yeah,
amongst the circle that I'm part of, the sisterhood that I'm part of, this is a fairly common experience. Not
I
being trusted to make our own decisions. Sorry, go
oh
ahead. I didn't mean to.
no, I
Interrupt.
just saying that there is a lot of education and a lot of awareness that needs to be brought around this, and people need to talk about it. As you rightly said, you're creating awareness among uh, your children, and you are trying to create awareness within your sisterhood, which is great. That's wonderful. And I think I hope that the message spreads and more people talk openly about it, and share it as a community, and also within the family, which is more important, so that people in the family can understand what's going on and how to support better. So
Oh,
that's
I absolutely hope that will happen with this generation and the generation that comes after. It definitely was not the case for Gen X. So I'm hoping, the
yeah,
the younger generations are way
Gen,
better.
Gen Z is a totally different ball
Mm-hmm.
game, so to speak. So they are more open, and um, they they talk more openly about. I mean, even when I speak to people in podcast, they
Mm-hmm.
come out more open and more open online and share their feelings and how they feel about things, which is great. And also they
Mm-hmm.
try to incorporate that in their daily lives, into making that small changes that would lead to better circumstances and better situations for themselves in the family and circle of friends, which is great, which is what I'm seeing.
Okay.
So, moving on, now that you are in United States, there are some contemporary issues which have been going on for a long time, like gun violence. Even today, I heard about some shooting in Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
Um, would you have any views on that? Or are you comfortable sharing your views on that?
Absolutely. I have a lot of views about it. I just think that common sense gun reform is a must, and that is one of the primary things I keep talking about in my local circles. So, again, like the whole history behind NRA and the lobbying and why Second Amendment is nobody is saying you shouldn't have a gun to go hunt, like a gun that shoots one bullet versus having an automatic rifle. The things that I'm at least pushing for in my local area to the politicians who represent me is that we want reform, and we want it now. This means background checks. This means making sure that if you have committed a felony, if you are accused of domestic violence, not accused, if you're if you're a known domestic abuser, you shouldn't be permitted to guns, which finally happened this week. Like, the Supreme Court did rule that if you have a DV record, you cannot possess arms, which is great. But we need more. So every time a shooting happens, there's like thoughts and prayers. There's, talk about arming more people, have good guys with guns versus bad guys. It's just, it's exhausting. And as a mother with three children still in schools, it's something that we actively think about. Kids are so used to, you know, shooter violence and, defending themselves against it. My 10-year-old would tell you how if there is an alarm that there's an active shooter in the school, they all know to barricade themselves. They all know how to find places to hide. They all know how to keep super quiet. It's heartbreaking, but that's the reality we live with. And every teacher that I've spoken to is ready to put their life on the line. And this is not how it should be.
Hmm. That's quite a complicated topic to compress that into such a podcast. So, anyway, moving on, what do you do in your free time? What are your hobbies and interests?
It keeps like every 2 years, I go through this intense stretch of diving into something. So up until a couple of years ago, I was totally into astrology. So I did like a 2-year course in Hellenistic
Astrology.
astrology. Uh-huh. So I did Hellenistic astrology, I did Vedic astrology, I did horary, I did all of that, and then said, now I've learned everything there is to it. So then the next big thing was K-drama. So I've been like since about a year and a half now, I'm into all things Korean, which is like K-dramas, K-pop, anything Korean media, and then Chinese dramas, Mandarin language, Taiwanese. Hi. So this whole spectrum of Asian dramas that pretty much has consumed me. And I just realized today that maybe it's leaving its death grip. So, I'm ready for the next whatever thing calls out to me. It's a
Eh,
pattern. It's like, I go through 2 to 3 year cycles of absolutely plunging into something and then coming up for air like 2 years later.
Interesting. So, probably this Korean thing is an influence of your children?
No, 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 no. I actually the other way around. I got into K-pop and now I've pulled my kids into it. So my youngest especially, she's totally into BTS because of me. So we listen to a lot of Korean music in the house. And I suspect my 71-year-old mom is now learning to identify most K-pop bands. So that's where we are.
That's pretty interesting. So, talking about astrology, what did you find out of all the studies? Do you have a gist of research or findings
Not
that you would?
recent. No, it's just made me a lot more appreciative of the universe that we live in.
Uh-huh.
Has kind of nailed the fact that again, personal opinion. I never was a believer in anything, but now I'm incredibly fatalist, meaning you can do everything. You have to put in the work, but the result is not in your hands. And I feel a lot of it is preordained. So there is this whole concept of prarabdha karma and all of that. I won't get into it, but it's made me a huge believer in you can you can and you should do all you can. You should put in the effort, but the outcome is truly left in it's in the universe's hands. And if you really manifest, the universe will conspire to make things true. So, and these are kind of at odds with each other, but anecdotally, I've seen it play out time and time again in my life.
What are your tips on manifesting?
I literally write things out. I imagine, I literally visualize things. Like I have a picture from I think 2016, 2015 when I first started writing. I have like a bunch of sticky things on my wall, but I said, become an author, have a book published, go big or go home, stuff like that. And I pass through it every day on the way out. And like this week when I was looking at it, almost everything I have written on those notes has come true.
Wow. So it's like reinforcing what you want to do and then visibly reminding yourself with notes and posters
Yeah,
and
pretty
such that.
much.
Okay,
Pretty
great.
much.
Okay. That part I have been missing. I have to do that.
Mhm. No, I think I'm sure there's a psychological basis for that. Like, sometimes putting things in words, manifesting it, seeing it in a visual form. Like for instance, when I think about a book that I'm writing, so the next couple of books that are in my head or on my laptop, I have covers that are like, in a visual form. I may not be the ones designing the cover, but I have a good idea of what I want it to look like. I imagine the book with my name on the spine, on a shelf, in a library, at an airport, in a bookstore. You know, incredibly visual detail in my head. And I keep doing that time and time again. It sounds stupid, but it's the motivation that keeps me going.
Right, absolutely right. I have heard that in a lot of books and articles, but I need to practice it. It is about constant reinforcement and reminding yourself of where you want to be, and it's better to have fixed goals so that we can go towards them. Otherwise, we
Sometimes, yes, it's a goal, but I remember in 2006, 2007, I constantly imagined twins. I mean, this is
ah
not something you have control on.
right.
But eventually, when we did adopt twins, I was like stunned because this was an image I had in my head and I had carried it in my head.
Wow, wow, that's so interesting.
So some things, yes, hard work and you can put in the effort. That's what I meant when I said you can put in the effort, you can go as far as you can, but the outcome truly doesn't belong to you.
Yes, it belongs to the universe. I agree. Okay, we will spend a couple of minutes. If you have any questions for me, I'll be able to answer.
I'm curious about, yeah, absolutely. I'm curious about your views on astrology and on spirituality. Like, where do you fall on that spectrum? Yeah.
I do believe in mathematics. I do believe in astrology. It's just that
Mm-hmm.
the errors that we have right now in the calculations and
Mm-hmm.
probably the planetary motions have moved forward and they are not exactly the way they calculated long back.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we might need to do some corrections in the planetary positions. See, the Earth is slowing down. You might have heard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
Likewise, many planets are actually having their own corrections and their own changes. So we have to accommodate those things, and we need to relook and we need to review the mathematics behind it. I don't know if we have the capabilities at this point of time, at this age, to do that, but definitely we need to look at it in a more close manner and do the correction so that it will be helpful for the future generations.
Counter to that, I actually feel it's about pattern recognition. Precision matters, yes, but if you're not looking for exact time date of certain thing, you can notice repetitive patterns in your life. And if you correlate that with transits and with things in your chart, that gives you stunning revelation.
The one thing that I do is to actively observe my thoughts, what's going on
Mm-hmm.
in my head,
Mm-hmm.
because as you said, there is a lot of pattern to it. And the moment I realize something negative or something, some hate towards something or something like that in my thoughts, I
Mm-hmm.
try to change that into a positive thought because at the end of the day, it is about being more inclusive and in every aspect of life we need inclusion. We need that other person or the other being to be part of our tribe or our crowd, so that we can all be joyful and be enjoying the life. Rather, what is happening right now in the world is about setting our own boundaries, our own, circles, and, having ego about that and things like that. If we break that circles, if we break that circle slowly and then expand our circle to include more and more people and more things into our life, I think it will be, a very joyful world. That's my perspective.
Interesting. Interestingly, I say interesting only because the phase I'm in currently, it's all about shutting people out. I was this person who
Well,
wanted to break barriers, keep
well,
an
uh,
expansive network. Yeah. Go ahead.
the amount of notifications that we get and the amount of disruptions that we get on a daily basis is humongous, and I'm not saying that we should uh,
Oh, I was
l-
not talking about communication at all. Nothing to do with
okay,
social media or notification.
okay,
But I think it's just a phase I'm in, like this
I
pruning
see.
of my network and literally isolating myself.
So it's about you can prune people, not an issue.
Mm-hmm.
but you can always open up to new opportunities. You can have your value system and say that, hey, this is my boundary and this is what these are the kind of people that I want in my life. And that changes. That is okay. As we evolve and our priorities change, that's okay. But the point really is about being inclusive. How can we be more inclusive in terms of understanding others, accommodating others, and making them as part of our own? I mean, when we really include them in our understanding, I think our circle kind of enlarges and there'll be more joy, is what I feel. And I have experienced that.
True and not true, meaning there are some places where you can be. Again, a big caveat because every person, it's a very subjective view, right? I feel like at this phase in my life, I am very clear about the kind of people I want to include. So, when we talk about being open and inclusive, when it comes to thoughts, ideas, people, this phase of my life, there was, a decade ago, I would have been, I would have played devil's advocate. I would have, extended grace to people who didn't hold similar political opinions or had like, I would have adopted the agree to disagree, but remain friends with people. But in today's political climate, whether it's in India or in the US, I just can't seem to extend that kind of grace when it comes to people who support ideas that are absolutely at odds with what I believe in. I'm not
Mhm.
saying it's right or wrong. It's just the frame of mind I'm in. That's my line in the sand that I refuse to cross.
Mm.
And it's something I'm noticing with time. And as I head towards my 50s and 60s, I feel like uh, time is short. There's very little time left on the earth, and I would choose to surround myself in places where I feel welcome, where I feel like there is a certain resonance. I don't want to expend that energy trying to make another person understand why I can't get with their ideas.
Yes. So, what? So, absolutely agree. I mean, there's no question that um, you can't change people. I mean, you can't make people understand your point of views. It's absolutely okay to have different set of point of views. Where I'm coming from is. So I learn from others mistakes, right? So I usually observe what kind of mistakes that people do, and I try not to make those kind of mistakes. um, a more better approach or a more better way of um, living is what I try to learn and try to incorporate. That's where I'm coming from. I absolutely agree that people have their own mindsets and they have their own ideologies and political views, which you cannot change, and which is very difficult because they have come through a set of experiences in their life which has led to make the conclusions that they have, and so it is not possible to change.
Oh, I wanted to know what was your journey towards like, having a podcast? Generally, that I've dabbled in these things over time, like, whether it's podcasting, whether it's putting finding a platform to air my thoughts. It's incredibly difficult to sustain it over a period of time. So I'm curious about your journey. Why podcast? What is your typical, what are your subjects of choice? And what is your ultimate goal in doing this?
So in terms of podcast, I think I have found myself motivated to express myself,
Mm-hmm.
and so I want to share that joy with others too. And so that's why I have this podcast to for people to come in and talk about themselves and their point of views and various issues. in the society and stuff like that. We had podcasts where we have, arranged marriage issues in the Indian
Mm-hmm.
community. Um, so this podcast is just developing, and I'm trying to bring in people from different walks of life, from different backgrounds, um, and try to get their point of views to express themselves. So that is the goal, and that is my motivation. And you are absolutely right that it is very difficult to maintain the momentum and to maintain the consistency in this podcast. I try my best. I'm also a tech person. From a deep technical background, I try to juggle between the tech and the artistic world.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, to express myself and to help others express themselves is my goal on the artistic side. And this is why I have the podcast, and I also write books.
Mm-hmm.
You
I
know,
know I owe you a review. I haven't yet gotten
yeah,
around to it. Yeah.
please, that it would be great to have your review. And
Mm-hmm.
so I write about social issues and some poetry, and I am in the
Mm-hmm.
process of working on my second book, which is actually, you can say it's a spin-off from one of the short stories in the
Oh,
first
nice.
book.
Uh-huh.
Um, it's interesting because people seem to like short form of stories. It need not be a short stories collection, but it can be a book of around 150 to 200 pages where
Mm-hmm.
they can quickly read and finish it off and move on, because there is so much to do and so much stuff to do in their lives. They also like continuity, from one story to other, so that they can remember, oh, Venkat wrote this story, and then this is the next story that is related to story. This kind of continuation is what they like, is what I figured. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to come up with a series of books,
Mm-hmm.
um, which are pretty much intertwined into the same social kind of settings and issues that I would like to talk about, mostly related to climate change and societal issues and things like that. But I think it would be really interesting to see how it pans out. But irrespective of what happens, as you said, the result is not in our hands. So I'm going to just put them out there and see what
Mm-hmm.
happens.
Good luck on your journey.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for your time today talking to me.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.
Wonderful. And I look forward to interact with you and also read your future books, and all the best for all the work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye bye. That was a great podcast with author Lakshmi. Please subscribe to this channel and follow it for more awesome podcasts. Opinions expressed by the guests in this podcast are their own. The host or the sponsors of the podcast do not condone the opinions expressed by the guests or the actions arising out of those opinions. Any decisions or actions that the listeners might take as a result of listening to this podcast must be based on their own judgment and will be at their own risk. The podcast host or their sponsors will not be held responsible for the consequences of any actions and or decisions taken as a result of any content in this podcast.